John, how are you this morning?
I'm doing good, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Here's the question. If I gave you the choice of Clayton Kershaw, his career, or Madison Bumgarner right now, whose career would you take?
It's getting interesting and more interesting as time goes on. I think Clayton Kershaw and everything that he has done would love, obviously, to have more bigger moments in the postseason, and I think he's about to have those. Right now, the personality of Madison Bumgarner, if you watch interviews or watch him pitch, he has the ability to just kind of shut down the big moments and be able to not treat them as big as they are. So that it's a great question. It always is intriguing and how people want to view certain persons in their careers, but the last impression always leaves the biggest one. And Madison Bumgarner has now pitched whatever it is, 21 plus innings of not giving up a run in an elimination game, and he would get the edge right now if you ask most people, just because of the dominance at the time of year. Over the course of a career, would argue Clayton Kershaw has had the more phenomenal overall career. You just can't put up those numbers over 35 starts year in and year out and not be considered the best pitcher in baseball.
I don't know if the analogy is it's like you and Maddox, that Maddox was unbelievable during the regular season, not as good during the postseason. You dominated in the postseason. Is it a fair analogy to look at it that way?
A little bit. I mean, look, I'm not going to lie and say that Maddox was the most prepared baseball pitcher I've ever seen. He was better than any hitter in the course of the 162 games, and in the most part, same thing in the postseason. But the game is so different in the postseason, it's not fair to compare. It would almost be, in the NBA, nobody plays defense, and all of a sudden they referee different, the defense is different, and you have to play a different style. In the postseason, there are a lot of components that are not the same that they are in a regular season game. And this is how I would describe it. Maddox was perfect. You can't be more perfect in the postseason. And sometimes, the tendency is to be more perfect, more eyes on the umpire, strike zones tighter. Hitters don't go up there looking at the same approach that they would in the regular season. They don't take any at-bats off. There is so many more attention to detail. The crowd's more exhausted. They're into every single pitch. So fair or not, guys can get wrongly judged in their careers based on the total dominance of their season. And then in a microscope, one game doesn't always, determine whether or not they lived up to the moment. Greg Maddux lost a lot of tough games in the postseason. And I think he would even say that there was no ability for him, or it didn't do him much value to turn it up, to throw harder, to be more perfect. And I remember having conversation with him. I'd go to him and say, Greg, there's no need for you to be any better. Like, that's what the postseason almost makes you feel like you've got to be better. And that's why a Bumgarner who's laid back, probably has an axe in his hand in the offseason cutting down trees, could care less.
But you see this with certain guys. Brady is not necessarily a great regular season quarterback as far as the numbers he puts up. But in the postseason, he's been great. Joe Montana was great in the postseason. Peyton Manning, I liken to Greg Maddux. Unbelievable during the regular season, just wasn't a great postseason performer. What is it about when you get to the postseason that it was different for you and different for Curt Schilling? Or, maybe it's in your head. I don't know. But something happens to certain players, and it doesn't happen to others.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think that's the hard part to quantify. People always want, especially in our sport now with all the analytics, they want to be able to quantify it. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. In our sport, a lot of people that are so-called smart guys says there's no such thing as clutch. I completely disagree with them. I think the ability to repeat at the highest level has to do a little bit with personality, but also a mindset. I think if you're not gifted, it'd be hard to take somebody who's not gifted or a college baseball player, throw them in the thrust of a World Series just because they have the mindset. That's not what I'm talking about. But being able to slow the game down, to see it in a different fashion, to not be afraid to fail. I think people don't understand how many athletes who care so much are afraid to fail. They don't want to fail. That's human nature. You have to be willing to fail to succeed at the highest level, in my opinion. And so just based on my own experiences, I pitched every game in the regular season to win, no doubt. But I didn't pitch every game in the regular season like a postseason game. I would never make it. I mean, the energy and the effort that I put and attention to detail is so off the charts in the postseason, I'm not guaranteed another start. I know I'm guaranteed another start in the regular season. I don't have to pour that kind of energy into one game, meaning it means that much more than the other. So if that kind of makes sense, that's where I lived. I loved the moment. I loved it focused. I was much more focused. And, it just worked for me. And I think that's the way it does for some guys. I think they're looking so hard. You can care so much. Sometimes you try too hard.
He's John Smoltz, Major League Baseball Network analyst, Hall of Famer. He'll be part of the broadcast with the Cubs and the Giants series. And tomorrow's Game 1 on Fox Sports 1 at 9. Saturday's Game 2 airing exclusively on the Major League Baseball Network at 8. Did Buck Showalter deserve all the criticism by leaving his Cy Young candidate in the bullpen?
No, and let me tell you why. Here's what I don't like about our world. All those people, all I want them to do is answer honestly. Put Britton in the game when they thought he should have been in the game. And there won't be one guy who didn't think it should be in the game in the 8th or the 9th. So put him in there. What changes? Nothing. The score's the same. He's still the best pitcher in the game. They get to the 11th inning. He can't keep pitching. The guys that I don't have respect for are the ones that said he should have started that inning. They shouldn't have brought in Ubaldo Jimenez. No, if you want to make a legitimate argument, you probably could have said, all right, I got to have him prepared to get me out of an unwinnable or probably tough scenario, and first and third would have been it. But I don't like people coming in Monday night quarterback, coming in and going, how can he not pitch? On the road, that's the issue you have. So the guys that he brought in out of the pen got him out of those double plays, back-to-back innings. You never hear anybody.
Did we lose you?
Focus.
Oh, okay.
They just want to focus and not being in the game. And I don't agree with it because I think everybody that was making that argument was calling for Britton in the 8th. Then calling for him in the 10th. You can't have it all. So this just didn't play out well for Baltimore.
All right, I'll leave you with this. Hopefully your phone stays clear. The Cubs will not make the World Series if what?
I think if the Cubs run into and this we don't have this type style anymore, but if the teams take advantage of the one weakness, and the only weakness I can tell you the Cubs have, is the starting pitchers don't typically hold runners on very well. Now, the problem is you got to get on base. Mm-hmm. But off of every one of the Cubs starters, and if you're able to make things happen on the base and put a lot of pressure on the starting rotation, which hasn't had that kind of scenario play out, then close games, they blew out a lot of teams. So it's any way you slice it, it's going to be fun, great matchups, teams that have been there, done that, and I think we're headed for, especially in the National League, some incredibly pitched series. In the American League, put your seatbelts on. This could be some tremendous scoring games.
John, good to visit with you. We'll catch up with you later on during the postseason. Thanks for joining us.
You got it, Dan. Thanks.
That's John Smoltz, Hall of Famer.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.